So as I was saying in the last part of this lecture, the eternal lines is the poem itself, and the poem is going to promise eternal life to the speaker or to the auditor who is listening to the speaker compare them to this summer's day. And then our last two lines, we have a sort of ambiguous statement, but at the same time it's conveying this eternal love or eternal life that is granted to the auditor. And we have a rhyming couplet as well. So our last two lines, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So this and this is such a very vague word, right, where you have to sort of read into it and try to figure out what the speaker is referring to. But we can, again, connect this earlier with the eternal lines and suggest that the speaker is talking about the poem itself. So as long as this lives, this will give life to you. So that's where we get this message, the everlasting love. It is sort of preserved within the poem itself. So as long as this poem is around, people are still reading it, as long as humanity is still around and reading and sharing this poem, you will have eternal life. Your love will not die. So we have our theme is this eternal love that is being represented here. So if I was going to write about this poem, if I was going to do an explication, I would want to start with the basic premise or overall what this poem is about. So sort of have a summary of what the main themes or ideas are. So I would say the speaker is discussing how love is eternal. So he's comparing summer to his lover. And he's saying, well, summer always comes to an end. The speaker's love for this person is eternal. And in fact, the poet's love or the speaker's love is so powerful that even death is not able to overpower it. And he's also suggesting that love will live on throughout time through the sonnet itself. So through the written word, through poetry, this love will continue to last and is eternal. So that's where we get our main premise, our main idea being conveyed. And if I had to sort of narrow it down to a theme or main idea, we can sort of, again, link it to the closeness or connection of love and this art form of poetry and the sonnet and what that does, how that is a celebration of love and life that the poet or speaker sees as overcoming or triumphing, a triumph of death. And this idea of eternity is very much central to both love and to art. So both promise that they can sort of last forever and will never die. So both of those things are being united in the speaker's message. The only seeming sort of contradiction or paradox to the poem is the fact that for a poem and for this love, this person to celebrate and be eternalized forever, it needs, people to continue to read it. So it's dependent on the fact that as long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so as long as there are people to read this poem, you will be granted immortality through the written word. So it's a bit of a paradox in the sense that eternal life is granted through mortal life. Men and women who will continue to read this poem generation after generation. So we have yet another love poem, this time by Shakespeare. And then if you were sort of explicating it, you could also note that Shakespearean sonnets have a distinct rhyme scheme. So every 4 lines, there's a sort of new set of rhymes. So day, May, temperate, and dates, A, B, A, B. And then shines, declines, dimmed, untrimmed, C, D, C, D. Fade, shade, owits, growits, E, F, E, F. And then a final rhyming couplet, C and the, which rhymes G, G. So that's how we would break down the rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean sonnet. And we've also noted the volta is present and the sort of distinct first octave, and then the last 6 lines mark a shift or change in the speaker's thoughts. So that's our basic Shakespearean sonnet. Again, it is full of literary, poetic language, personification. There's some figurative language, and symbolism as well. So the sun and the eternal summer, all these are sort of very figurative language that conveys the theme of eternal love, eternal life, and the celebration of poetry as an art form that can eternalize somebody or somebody's pay a tribute to their life and love. Okay, so we're going to look at another example of a sonnet. This time we're dealing with Spenser. So Spenser is writing about another love sonnet, this one Amaretti, Sonnet 75. He's writing about his wife, but we want to distinguish between the speaker and the poet himself. So we would, again, not make that claim that the poet and the speaker are the same. And in this poem, we also have themes and ideas related to love and eternity being expressed. So very similar in terms of theme and ideas as the Shakespeare sonnet that we just did. So let's read it out loud and try to distinguish if there's any differences in sound, rhyme scheme than the Shakespearean sonnet. So one day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. Vain hand, said she, that doubt'st in vain essay a mortal thing so to immortalize. For I myself shall like to this decay, and eke my name be wiped out likewise. Not so, quote I. Let baser things devise to die in dust, but you shall live by fame. My verse your virtue rare shall eternize, and in the heavens write your glorious name. Where, when his death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live, and later life renew. So we have a premise. There's a male speaker and a female that he's addressing, and what they're talking about is writing her name upon the beach, the sands of the beach, and then the water coming, the tide coming in, wiping away what they've just written, and this problem of trying to immortalize their love and wanting it to live forever, wherein nature or mortality, we know that everything is going to die and decay. So this desire for eternal love and then trying to fight against death in order to make that happen. So we have our speaker, who is the I, and then he's expressing his love to a female auditor. So we have the basic premise laid out, the first 4 lines. One day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. So the speaker has written the name of his beloved. Here I've sort of used an example image here, which would be sort of writing a woman's name in the sand and then the tide coming in and washing that away. So he tries a second time. Again, I wrote it with a second hand, so he tries again. But once again, the tide came in and destroyed it. So we have my pains, his prey. So another personification of the tide or nature preying on this speaker's desire to make his love eternal. And then we have the auditor speaks back. So unlike the first example of sonnet, we have actually words spoken from a female auditor who says, "Vain man," said she, "thou dost in vain essay a mortal thing so to immortalize. For I myself shall like to this decay, and eke my name be wiped out likewise." So the female auditor is saying, well, you're just being vain, and we're all mortal, so don't try to immortalize myself or our love, because it's just going to be wiped out, right? So this is the other side of the argument, saying, there's no way to immortalize something that is mortal. I'm a human, you're a human, we're going to die. That's the way things are. And then on our 8th line, this would be our volta, "Not so, quote I." So again, it switches back to our speaker, who says that's not the case. Let baser or more primitive things die in dust, but you shall live in fame. So you shall go on and live for eternity. My verse, your virtues rare shall eternize, and in the heavens write your glorious name. So my verse, again, he's talking about the poem itself, will eternalize you, this auditor, and you shall live on forever in the heavens. You'll be sort of famous because you're written in the poem is written about you, and in this way you shall be granted eternal life. And so our final 2 lines, again a rhyming couplet, sort of summarize the theme or main idea of the sonnet. And then he says, "Where, when as death shall all the world subdue, our love shall live and later life renew." So he's saying, rather than succumb to death, be subdued by death, as all life is in this world, our love shall live on and be renewed over and over again. So through the poem itself, our love shall continue on. So very much similar to our last sonnet in its message, that the art as in poetry, is a way to immortalize love, right? Which is fleeting. Even though we'll die, our love will live on through this poem. So again, we have this very similar message about eternal love and the desire to make permanent something that is impermanent and mortal. So fighting against death is one of these themes or ideas being conveyed in this poem. But this one we have two speakers. So we have the speaker, the I, who is addressing a woman, and then the woman speaks back. So the second sort of quatrain is devoted to her voice and what she says against the speaker's first passage. And then other than that, we have personification and symbolism and figurative language as well. So There's lots of examples that you can sort of take apart, but very much it's a similar rhyme scheme: A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F.